In Japan, the city of Fukuoka is known as the city of Tonkotsu Ramen. In fact, it could be said that all the famous Tonkotsu Ramen in Japan originate from Fukuoka. Even the world-famous Ichiran, I believe you guys know about Ichiran, came from Fukuoka. Their first restaurant is in Fukuoka. In fact, if you eat Ichiran in Fukuoka, instead of the round bowl you'll be getting, you actually get a rectangular bowl instead. In our continued series of ramen recommendations other than Ichiran, we are here today at a particular ramen shop that is extremely popular here in Fukuoka. The name of this particular ramen shop is called Isso.
Not only that, we are also going to do a comparison for the ages. This is not just any comparison, but a fight between father and son, son and father. We will pit Isso's Tonkotsu Ramen against itself, or I should say, its very own son, Isso's very own cup noodles that was recently released. Who will emerge victorious? Will the ramen show who's boss? Or its very own cup noodles stage an upset and actually beat the current and widely regarded as the most popular ramen in Fukuoka? Let's find out. Oh boy, look at that! Unbelievable looking bowl of ramen! Absolutely fabulous! Now, what exactly is Isso Ramen, you might be wondering? What is so special about this bowl of ramen here? Isso opened its doors in Hakata City, Fukuoka in 2012. At this point, you're probably wondering, yeah, a Tonkotsu Ramen opens and over time became popular. Yeah, sounds ordinary enough, nothing special here. And that's where you're wrong. Let me give you some everybody's favorite word, context. Did you know that Fukuoka prefecture is recognized and known as the birthplace of Tonkotsu Ramen? Let's take a time machine and head back to the 30s. More specifically to 1937. There was a noodle store in Kurume City, Fukuoka called the Nanking Sendeo. Its owner heard that ramen, in particular the shinasoba, a soy-based ramen, was popular in Tokyo and Yokohama. Hence, taking inspiration from and formulating his own, such as, instead of using chicken bones, very common back in those days, Nankin Sanryo's owner used pork bones instead, as it was cheaper, and the Tonkotsu Ramen was born. As a matter of fact, the very first Tonkotsu Ramen doesn't even look like the modern day version that we are familiar with. Its broth was almost clear-based in comparison to its modern day counterpart. And it was only after 10 years since its creation, the Tonkotsu Ramen, especially its broth, became the cloudy white broth that we are familiar with. Ironically, through an accident from another Tonkotsu Ramen store called Sankyu, it was said that the owner of Sankyu, in his usual routine while simmering the broth, accidentally used a heat too high. And in a twist of fate, instead of the semi-clear broth that he was expecting, it became cloudy white. He found the broth to be very delicious, and the rest was history. Since then, the popularity of Tonkotsu Ramen has only been on the rise. Viral trends of Tonkotsu Ramen began spreading all over Japan. And just as sure, back here in Hakata City, Fukuoka, birthplace of the Tonkotsu Ramen, combined with the love for ramen in general, the competition for serving the most delicious and most popular ramen is peaked here in Fukuoka. The ramen rivalries and competition are so strong and intense such that Fukuoka prefecture is known as a ramen battleground. And with more than 1,500 ramen stores in Fukuoka, it is not hard to see why. A further investigative piece from Japanese public broadcaster NHK, it is found that just in 2022 alone, impressively, there were 97 newly established ramen stores. And 30% of them were Tonkotsu Ramen. Staggering! And you could imagine, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And what's below it are all your established household ramen brands and names in Fukuoka. Very daunting if you ask me. And if anything, it is probably not a wise business decision to set up a ramen shop in Fukuoka. This is where our ramen topic today, Isso Ramen, comes into the picture and show you why it is so special and legendary. As mentioned earlier, Isso Ramen started in 2012. Now here comes the insane part. Just within a single year, Isso went viral. What? Hold up! You mean to tell me that after saying Fukuoka is a ramen battleground, has around 1,700 stores, with all the big names like Ichiran, Ippudo, Shinshin, and many more, and within a single year, they became viral? Yup. Nandato? Now there, this is considered very remarkable for one other reason as well. In Japan, cuisine conservatism in the area of taste is strong. Japanese locals here are very protective of the taste of a particular food once they've acquired it. This is especially true for ramen. And this is subtly shown across different cultural platforms here in Japan. For example, in TV dramas, a particular character always visits the same restaurant to eat the same particular dish. 2. Probably the most famous example of them all, a certain manga main character and his undying love for a particular ramen store. To this day, massive lines at Isso ramen shops could still be seen day in and day out. So, why is Isso ramen so delicious to a point where it allowed them to break past all those barriers and become legendary and popular in such a short time? What's the secret? This is what we're going to find out right now. Let's begin with the noodles first. This should always be the number one thing you do for any bowl of ramen. Not enough noodles. I want another bite. Oishii! Truth to be told, I'm quite surprised with two things. Firstly, the noodles are flat and actually very thin in texture and size. This is something I did not expect. Yes, I know there are thin ramen noodles out there, but these noodles here from Isso, both the size are actually very similar to regular cup ramen noodles. Even the texture feels similar. It is soft, but punchy enough such that the structure of the noodles could be felt immediately. I will probably say an in-between a hard textured and a medium textured noodle? Yeah, that's about right. And secondly, for this size and texture, it is very delicious, which is very surprising because in a regular cup noodle, those noodles are mere afterthought, basically carbs that just fills your stomach. But the noodles at Isso here, even with a rather similar size and texture, it does not absorb the broth too much, to a point where the noodles loses its character. I could still taste the weak composition of the noodle. And needless to say, it meshes very well with the broth. A match made in heaven! At the same time, the customary alkaline taste that you can expect of a ramen noodle is kept to a minimum, and honestly speaking, very negligible. Very delicious. One fun fact about this ramen noodle. Apparently, the noodles are so delicious at Isso Ramen that many customers, in fact, 80% of them, order a second noodle serving for a complete experience. And I could definitely see why. The goal is actually to create a perfect unity and harmony between the broth and noodles, such that one doesn't become an afterthought that you can't finish the bowl with. And from my tasting, Isso definitely accomplishes that goal with those delicious noodles. It matches very well with the broth and feels light enough that the noodles allow you to complete and leave behind a completely empty bowl. Oh my goodness, look at the broth. Look at the amount of froth this thing has. The legend is true. This is dead broth. The broth that made Isso Ramen special and catapulted into legendary status. According to Isso themselves, only local bred piglets are used for the broth. 3 parts are used, from the pig's head, backbone, and knuckles. They're cooked over high heat until the bones themselves became flaky. In addition, Isso mentioned they use the Yobimo-doshi method to make their broth. Usually, with the Yobimo-doshi method, it involves using a stock pot that includes broth made from day one of the shop's opening and a second stock pot that has broth that is made on the actual day itself. Both broths are then mixed to give you a final broth that is served to customers. Now, this method is very intensive, difficult, and expensive. As you can imagine, the taste and flavor from the day one stock pot needs to be maintained constantly and daily. And to do that, a lot of ingredients had to be used, and much technique is required. And if done well, as in Isso's case, what you end up with is a very authentic bowl of Tonkotsu Ramen, with the original flavor as intended by its creators. Isso's broth has another characteristics as well. From its preparation and simmering, bubbles could be seen on the surface of the broth, and fans of Isso Ramen started naming this the Tonkotsu Cappuccino, as it looks like froth from a cappuccino. This got me really interested in the broth right now. Honestly speaking, for the ramen, especially Tonkotsu Ramen, all aficionados of ramen will know that the broth literally will make or break the ramen, because almost all of the flavor you'll be getting lies in the broth. Time for the full impact of the broth with no interruptions. Really excited for this. Remember everyone, with immeasurable preparation and the Yobimodoshi method that involves using a day one broth, this is the famed, the vaunted Tonkotsu broth from Isso. Mecha oishii! Simply indescribable! Oh my goodness! What I've tasted here is the prime core flavor of tonkotsu. So refined! The analogy I could come up for this is a swordsmith refining the blade in the furnace, hit by hit, toughening out the blade, taking out the impurities, and at the end of it, you have a prime and pure legendary sword. This broth is literally that sword. The froth is just on the surface, and once you passed it, oh my goodness, I tasted depths of flavor I never thought possible. Such refined tonkotsu purity. The natural sweetness from the pork bone marrow is so succulent and sweet. The umami flavor at this point is just max! Completely unbelievable! Isso also mentioned that they use a special homemade sauce, which is an unique blend of soy sauce from Fukuoka, to bring out the maximum umami flavor of the broth. In addition, they added different types of seafood to give added depth to the broth. Absolutely fabulous. Lastly, I would like to add, even though it has the customary Tonkotsu Ramen creamy look, surprisingly enough, it does not taste as creamy as it looks. The tonkotsu flavor was able to puncture through so distinctly with immeasurable clarity and pronounced taste. Here comes a new challenger. This is Isso's Ramen very own cup noodle. Now there, you're probably gonna say, this is not a fair comparison, yada yada yada. Well, to that, I never once said the cup noodle will win, ain't it? Ever watch Initial D? If you do, then you definitely remember why Takumi still decided to compete against Sudo-san's Land Evil, even though he knows he will lose. What I'm trying to compete or compare here is how much value you get from Isso's very own cup noodle. And who knows, we might be in for a surprise. And if a miracle did happen, could Isso's very own cup noodle then be crowned the king of tonkotsu flavored cup noodles? We are going to compare in 5 different categories. Since it's a foregone conclusion the ramen will be better, we're going to compare them in a unique way. In each category for Isso Ramen, instantly they get a 5 rating. However, for Isso Cup Ramen, we will rate how much it will score against Isso Ramen for each category. Let's begin!
Yeah, I can see that they are trying to recreate the froth that is found in the original ramen. Well, I guess this is a decent attempt. They released this 19th of December late last year, 2023. So this is relatively new. It's pretty heavy, this cup. This is definitely not the size of your regular cup noodles, you know, those Nissin cup noodles, that kind of thing. Okay, as you can see, it's pretty huge. Alright, I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna tell you how it tastes. Let me give it a good stir of it to mix things up, to mix the flavors up. Ooh, look at this. Come on guys, Have a look at this. Alright, pretty good there, if you ask me, for a cup noodle. For a cup noodle, the noodle of this standard here. The size is pretty close to the original, ramen. The actual ramen itself. The size of the noodles are pretty similar. The noodle texture is actually pretty close to the original ramen. Yeah, it's almost, match for match similar. Obviously, there will be some difference. After all, this is, processed in comparison to the actual thing. Look at this. Right? Very, very similar, as you can see on the screen right now. Very similar to the actual ramen. Now, in terms for the texture, for this particular cup noodle, it's slightly a tad bit more softer than the original one. Yeah, the original one is a little more stiffer, a little more firm. This one is kind of soft, maybe slightly even just one grade lower than medium. So it's just one grade softer than medium. Definitely the noodle flavor here is not as strong as the actual ramen. But overall, a very good match, very close match. There are some things which I still don't know what this is. I have not tasted this yet. This was found in the instant noodle just now, as you can see. Yeah, I guess this is actually some sort of a pork flavoring. This is used probably to enhance the flavor of the entire cup noodle to match the original ramen even more. Yeah, that's probably it. You get your Welsh onions. You also get your black fungus, as you can see over here. Yeah, overall, pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, this is currently only sold at Lawson's convenience store. You cannot get it in anywhere in Japan except Lawson convenience store. Also, in terms for the broth, very close match. Definitely you cannot compare to the original ramen broth. But if you ask me in terms of the sweetness, is it a one-to-one comparison? No. But it's probably a 0.7 to 1 comparison. So 0.7 of this particular broth to 1 of the actual ramen in terms of its performance. That 30% that is missing is probably not attainable because after all, this is a instant cup noodle. The soup is instant as well as compared to the original broth. Yeah, so actually this is well done if you ask me, Isso. Pretty good cup noodles here, and actually the quantity is a lot if you ask me. In comparison to those Nissin cup noodles, those are a little smaller. Those are a little smaller unless you buy the big giant cup. I guess in terms of the volume, this is probably closer towards the big giant cup. Yeah, fantastic over here.